What if the world's most important oil highway just went almost silent and almost nobody noticed? One ship. That's it. That's all that crossed one of the busiest waterways on Earth in a single day, right after American bombs lit up the night sky over an Iranian island. Before we go further, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now, not for me, but so more people can see the truth behind this story instead of the watered-down version everyone else is telling. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of this crisis as it unfolds, and share this with one person who still thinks this war is far away from them. It isn't. It's already touching the gas pump, the grocery store, and your electricity bill, whether you feel it yet or not. Now let's talk about what actually happened. On July 23rd, ship tracking systems recorded something strange happening in the Strait of Hormuz. This is the narrow channel between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, and it is one of the most important pieces of water on the entire planet. Roughly a fifth of all the oil the world uses every single day passes through this strait. Tankers the size of city blocks squeeze through a lane that, at its narrowest point, is only a few miles wide. For decades, this water has been a lifeline. Oil goes out, money comes in, and the global economy keeps humming along. But on that day, only one tanker made the crossing. Not two, not 10, not the usual flow of dozens of vessels moving in both directions like clockwork. Just one. And it wasn't even heading into the Gulf. It was heading out, loaded with close to 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude oil, aimed for a port in China, expected to arrive sometime in the middle of August. Meanwhile, not a single tanker entered the strait that day. Not one ship was willing to sail into the Persian Gulf to pick up new cargo. Think about that for a second. This is a route that normally sees oil flowing like a river, day and night, rain or shine. And on this particular day, it looked more like a ghost town. This didn't happen in isolation. It happened on the same night the United States finished its 13th straight night of military strikes against Iran. 13 nights. Not one surprise attack, not a single strike to send a message, but a sustained, repeated campaign, night after night after night. And the target that night wasn't random. American forces reportedly hit Qeshm Island, a place many people outside the region have never heard of, but a place that sits right at the edge of one of the most sensitive waterways in the world. Iranian media reported explosions across the island. International reporting described Qeshm as a location holding Iranian naval assets, including something that sounds almost like science fiction: unmanned boats capable of attacking commercial ships without a single person on board. That's where the phrase "drone boat island" comes from. And it's a phrase that deserves your full attention because it explains almost everything happening in this story. Here's what we actually know for certain. The United States has confirmed hitting several categories of targets inside Iran: command centers, where military decisions get made; drone storage facilities, where weapons and equipment get kept before they're used; communication networks, which relay orders from commanders to the people on the ground and out on the water; coastal surveillance sites, the eyes watching every ship that moves through the strait; and maritime capabilities, the actual boats, drones, and equipment used to threaten vessels at sea. What we don't know, and this is important, is the full picture of what was destroyed. Nobody has released a complete list showing exactly which drone boats, which storage bunkers, or which specific pieces of equipment were wiped out on Qeshm that night. So while explosions were confirmed, the claim that every single threat on that island has been erased simply isn't backed up by hard evidence yet. And that creates a strange and uncomfortable contradiction. On one hand, the American military says the Strait of Hormuz remains open. Fighter jets are hitting command centers. Precision weapons are striking surveillance posts. Storage facilities are being destroyed. Tens of thousands of American troops are stationed across the region, ready to respond. On paper, this sounds like overwhelming force being used to guarantee safe passage for global shipping. On the other hand, look at what the actual ships are doing. Look at the tanker data. It doesn't look like a protected, open corridor. It looks like a route the entire shipping industry is terrified to touch. So which version is true? Is Hormuz open, or is it functionally shut down? The honest answer is both, depending on how you define the word open. And understanding that difference is the key to understanding this entire crisis. Let's break down why Qeshm Island matters so much in the first place. Geography is destiny here. The island sits right next to the strait, close enough that anyone stationed there can watch nearly every ship that tries to pass through. Big tankers don't have unlimited freedom of movement. They're constrained by narrow shipping lanes, water depth, coastlines, and international boundaries. Their paths are, in a sense, predictable. That predictability is exactly what makes Qeshm so dangerous as a surveillance post. Iran doesn't need to search the entire ocean. It just needs to watch one narrow lane of water, and everything that matters will eventually pass right in front of it. This isn't the first time Qeshm has come up either. Earlier this year, American forces reportedly struck radar systems and drone control centers on and around the island after aggressive Iranian activity in the region. Days later, there were reports of another strike on a military control station there, this time following drone and missile launches. In other words, this island keeps showing up again and again in this conflict. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. It tells you that American intelligence believes Qeshm plays a central role in Iran's ability to threaten ships in Hormuz. But here's the complicated part. An island is not a single military base. Qeshm has towns, it has roads, it has civilians living ordinary lives, ports, industrial zones, and military sites all mixed into the same landmass. Saying Qeshm was struck tells you almost nothing about which specific building was hit, how many drone boats survived, or whether Iran managed to move its most valuable equipment before the bombs ever landed. Getting real clarity on that will take satellite images, intelligence gathering, and time. Explosions on the news are dramatic, but they are not proof of total victory. So let's talk about the actual weapon at the center of all this, a drone boat. Picture a small speedboat, but with nobody steering it. It can be controlled remotely from a distance, or it can follow a pre-programmed route straight to its target. Some of these boats are used just for watching, carrying cameras and sensors to feed intelligence back to Iranian commanders. Others are built to be one-time weapons, packed with explosives, sent racing toward a target with no intention of ever coming back. The logic is brutally simple. Nobody has to risk a pilot. Nobody has to risk a crew. A small, fast, hard-to-detect boat can approach a massive tanker that costs more than $100 million, and if it hits the right spot, it can cause devastating damage. You might think a tiny boat couldn't possibly hurt something as massive as a supertanker, and physically, you'd be partly right. These giant ships are built with multiple compartments and serious safety systems. They're not going to sink from one small explosion in most cases, but that's not really the point. A hit near the engine room could leave a ship completely unable to move. A hit near the bridge could knock out navigation and communication. A hit near the waterline could cause flooding. Even a small amount of physical damage can trigger a massive economic reaction. The lane gets shut down while rescue crews respond. Nearby ships stop dead or turn around. Insurance companies panic and raise their prices overnight. Crews start refusing to sail through that area at all, and oil traders begin pricing in the very real risk that the next ship through might not make it either. That's the real weapon here. It's not really about sinking ships, it's about fear. A cheap drone boat can create financial damage worth billions without ever needing to sink a single tanker. For an attack like this to actually happen, a whole chain of events has to line up. Iran needs to detect an approaching ship using radar, cameras, or human observers. It needs to identify what kind of ship it is and where it's heading. Commanders need to approve the mission. Orders need to reach the launch team. The boat needs to leave its hiding spot without getting destroyed first. It needs to be guided toward a moving target out on open water. And finally, it needs to actually get past whatever protection surrounds that tanker. This is exactly why the American strike list makes sense as a strategy. If you take out the command center, you disrupt the decision-making. If you destroy the communication network, orders get delayed or lost entirely. If you wipe out coastal surveillance, Iran loses the ability to even see which ships are coming. If you hit the storage facilities, there are fewer weapons available to launch in the first place. The United States doesn't necessarily need to destroy every single drone boat sitting in the water. It just needs to break the system that turns those boats into a real coordinated threat. That's the theory, at least. The question is whether it's actually working, and that brings us back to that one lonely tanker. While American jets were still striking targets on Qeshm, a single supertanker called the New Giant was making its way out of the Persian Gulf, carrying roughly 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude, bound for China. It wasn't heading into the danger zone, it was heading away from it. That detail matters more than people realize. A ship that's already inside the Gulf with a full tank of oil doesn't have many good options. It can sit anchored and wait, burning money every single day it doesn't deliver its cargo, or it can take the risk and try to leave. But a ship sitting outside the strait has a much simpler choice available to it. It can simply refuse to enter at all. That's exactly what seems to have happened. The New Giant had already loaded its cargo. The oil had already been bought and paid for. Waiting around indefinitely inside a war zone made no financial sense. So the operator made the call to take the risk and get out. But look at the other side of the equation. Every single tanker that would have needed to enter the Gulf that day to pick up new cargo chose not to. Not one of them was willing to take that risk. So the number one tanker isn't just a military statistic. It's a snapshot of pure fear playing out in real time, decision by decision, company by company. Now, if you're just now clicking on this video, or if you've been watching but haven't hit that subscribe button yet, this is the moment to do it. This story is moving fast, and if this crisis escalates the way some analysts are predicting, you're going to want to already be here for what comes next, not scrambling to catch up later. Let's talk about the difference between open and operational, because this is where a lot of confusion is coming from. American officials keep saying the Strait of Hormuz remains open, and in a strict technical sense, that's true. There's no wall blocking the water, no ship has been sunk in the middle of the channel, making it physically impossible to pass. American forces are actively present in the region, and legally, ships are allowed to sail through. But commercial shipping doesn't run on legal permission alone. It runs on confidence. Ship owners have to approve a voyage, companies chartering the vessel have to accept the risk, insurance providers have to be willing to cover it, crews have to be willing to actually sail into that water. If even one link in that chain breaks, the voyage simply doesn't happen, no matter what any government announces on television. So you end up with two very different definitions of the word open. The military definition says, can a ship physically pass through this water? The commercial definition says, are ships actually choosing to pass through this water in normal numbers? By the first definition, Hormuz is open. By the second definition, one tanker crossing and 0 tankers entering is not open. That's close to a shutdown. And both of these things can be true at exactly the same time. That's not a contradiction, it's exactly what this kind of warfare is designed to produce. Iran doesn't need to defeat the American Navy in open battle. It just needs to create enough uncertainty that shipping companies decide the risk isn't worth it. If insurance premiums spike high enough, if crews start refusing assignments, if even one attack succeeds, that fear spreads through the entire industry within hours. Now let's put some real numbers behind this so you understand exactly what's at stake. In recent years, something close to 20 million barrels of oil per day have passed through the Strait of Hormuz. That's not a small side route. That is roughly a fifth of everything the entire world consumes in oil every single day. Most of that oil flows toward markets in Asia, feeding factories, power plants, and economies that depend on a steady, predictable supply. Against that backdrop, one tanker carrying 2 million barrels sounds impressive on its own. And in isolation, it is a lot of oil. But compared to the 20 million barrels a day that would normally be expected to flow through this exact same waterway, it's a tiny fraction of normal activity. This isn't a story about oil producers suddenly stopping production. Oil is still sitting in storage tanks across Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE. It's still sitting in pipelines, waiting at export terminals. The problem isn't supply, the problem is movement. Until a tanker actually loads that oil and makes it through the strait, it might as well not exist for the countries waiting to buy it. And here's the danger of that. Storage tanks eventually fill up. Idle tankers cost money every single day they aren't working. Producers may be forced to slow down output. Refineries overseas start scrambling for alternative sources. What starts as a shipping problem in one narrow strait can spread outward into a full-blown global energy shock within weeks, not months. Drone boats are just one piece of a much larger and more dangerous puzzle. Iran has built what analysts describe as a distributed threat system spread across the entire region. Coastal missiles that can strike large ships from land. Aerial drones that can search for and hit exposed sections of a tanker. Fast attack boats capable of surrounding or attempting to board a vessel. Underwater mines creating hidden danger beneath the surface. Surveillance networks feeding real-time targeting information. And unmanned boats that can blend into normal maritime traffic until it's too late to react. Individually, any one of these threats might be manageable for the world's most powerful navy. But combine them together, and you create something far harder to defend against. Imagine a tanker moving through the strait. A surveillance drone appears overhead. Small boats start approaching from one side. The tanker changes course to avoid them. Meanwhile, a coastal radar station is tracking every single move it makes. An unmanned explosive boat approaches from a completely different angle. At the exact same time, escorting warships have to consider the possibility of an incoming missile or a mine sitting quietly beneath the waves. Every individual piece of that puzzle might be something the American military can handle on its own. But when everything happens at once, it creates chaos, confusion, and just enough hesitation to make a mistake. That overwhelming complexity is exactly what Iran's strategy is built around. This is also why American air power, as dominant as it clearly is, has real limits here. The United States can absolutely destroy a fixed radar station. It can absolutely hit a known command post or a storage facility sitting out in the open. But the easiest target in any war is always the weapon that stays in one predictable place. So Iran's answer is simple: spread everything out. Move small boats constantly between different harbors. Store equipment in separate, disconnected locations. Hide gear inside ordinary-looking civilian buildings, tunnels, or covered shelters that don't scream military target from above. Use decoys to draw American weapons toward empty targets. None of that requires the massive infrastructure of a full naval base. A much smaller, scattered support network can be enough to keep the threat alive. This is exactly why 13 consecutive nights of American airstrikes don't automatically translate into 13 nights of normal shipping traffic returning. The United States can absolutely destroy real, significant pieces of Iran's military capability, strike after strike, night after night, and still fail to convince nervous shipping companies that it's actually safe to sail. Because the standard those companies are using isn't, has Iran lost some weapons? Their standard is, does Iran have too few weapons left to hit my ship, specifically on my exact voyage today? That is an incredibly difficult bar to clear, and it explains why fear can outlast the actual military threat by weeks or even months. There's another piece of this puzzle that doesn't get talked about enough: insurance. A tanker voyage through this region depends on far more than a brave captain willing to take the risk. The ship's owner has to approve it. The company chartering the vessel has to accept the risk on their end. The cargo owner has to sign off. The insurance company has to be willing to underwrite it. And the crew, actual human beings with families, has to be willing to sail into that water. An insurance company doesn't need proof that Iran is definitely going to attack a specific ship. It only needs to believe that the odds have shifted enough to make coverage expensive. A single tanker can be worth well over $100 million. Its cargo can be worth just as much again. A serious incident could mean crew casualties, massive environmental cleanup costs, salvage operations, and weeks of lost income. So premiums quietly rise before any attack even happens, purely based on risk. And if coverage becomes too expensive or simply unavailable, the ship stays parked outside the strait, no matter what any government official says on camera. This is how Iran can maintain real pressure on the global economy, even while losing military assets on the ground. Fear doesn't require a fully intact navy. It only requires a credible chance that one surviving weapon could still get through. So what happens now on Qeshm? If drone boats, surveillance gear, and communication equipment really were stored there, Iranian commanders almost certainly assumed the Americans could come back at any moment. Surviving equipment likely gets moved. Launch teams relocate. Radar systems may go quiet to avoid detection. Communication may shift to backup channels that are harder to track. This creates an ongoing cycle. American forces strike a known location. Iran shifts its surviving assets somewhere new. Satellites and surveillance aircraft try to track that movement. A new target gets identified. Another strike follows. But this cycle cuts both ways. Iran can also use it to its advantage, moving fake equipment into visible locations, activating decoy communications, forcing the United States to waste expensive precision weapons on targets that are worth almost nothing. This entire conflict, at its core, has become a battle of intelligence and endurance. The United States wants to destroy Iran's maritime capability faster than Iran can hide it and rebuild it. Iran wants to preserve just enough capability to keep the global shipping industry too scared to move. It's also worth looking at what's happening in the other major choke point nearby, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, because the contrast is striking. While Hormuz saw almost no traffic, dozens of tankers were still crossing through Bab el-Mandeb on that same day, despite ongoing threats from Houthi forces in that region. Some tankers were even rerouting completely, choosing a much longer path through the Suez Canal instead of their usual faster route, simply to avoid extra risk. Major oil companies were offering alternative loading points elsewhere just to sidestep the danger. This tells you something important. This isn't just a Hormuz problem. It's becoming a region-wide reshuffling of how the entire world moves its oil, with shipping companies constantly recalculating risk at multiple flashpoints at the same time. So did these strikes on Qeshm actually work? There are really three possible outcomes here. The first possibility is major, lasting success. If American weapons genuinely destroyed key command centers, storage sites, and communication networks, Iran's ability to coordinate future maritime attacks could be seriously weakened for a long time. The second possibility is partial success. Maybe some assets were destroyed, but mobile or well-hidden systems survived intact. In that world, Iran loses some capacity, but keeps just enough ability to threaten select high-value targets whenever it chooses to. The third possibility is that Iran saw this coming and moved its most valuable equipment out ahead of time. In that scenario, buildings get destroyed, explosions light up the news cycle, but the actual weapons meant for future attacks are sitting somewhere else entirely, completely untouched. Right now, based on everything publicly available, there simply isn't enough evidence to confidently pick just one of these outcomes. What we can do is watch closely for real signs of what's actually happening. Does tanker traffic through Hormuz start climbing back up from 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 crossings a day? That would be a genuine sign that confidence is slowly returning. Does inbound traffic pick back up, meaning empty ships are actually willing to enter the Gulf to load new cargo? That matters even more than outbound traffic because it shows real trust, not just desperation. Does Iranian maritime activity noticeably decline, with fewer fast boats, fewer drone launches, fewer threatening movements near the shipping lanes? Do American strikes keep hitting the exact same locations over and over, suggesting the threat there hasn't actually gone away? And finally, do insurance premiums start dropping, and do major tanker companies start quietly returning to normal operations? That last one might be the most honest signal of all, because money doesn't lie the way press statements sometimes do. From here, there are really 4 different paths this crisis could take. A gradual reopening, where American strikes genuinely weaken Iran's capability, escorts prove reliable, tankers complete safe crossings one after another, and confidence slowly rebuilds over time. A frozen stalemate where Iran launches few or no major attacks, but still holds on to just enough hidden capability to keep the industry too nervous to return, leaving the strait technically open but commercially empty for a long, uncertain stretch. A dangerous escalation where a drone boat, a missile, or a hidden mine actually succeeds in hitting another vessel, triggering an even larger American response, and possibly dragging both sides into a far more destructive confrontation than anything we've seen so far. Or finally, some kind of negotiated arrangement, where regional powers quietly work out temporary rules allowing controlled shipping to resume, while larger political negotiations continue in the background, even if nobody wants to publicly admit that's what's happening. Here's the truth sitting underneath every single number in this story. The United States is fighting to destroy Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in this region. Iran is fighting to preserve just enough uncertainty to keep controlling how that shipping behaves, without ever needing to fire a shot at every single ship. Washington measures its success in destroyed command centers and burned out storage facilities. The global shipping industry measures its success in something far simpler: ships that complete their voyage and arrive safely. Right now, those two measurements haven't lined up. Officials say the strait is open. The tanker data says the world is still too afraid to use it. And that gap between what governments announce and what ship captains are actually willing to risk might end up being the single most important number in this entire story. Not the explosions, not the press conferences, just one simple question being asked in boardrooms and shipping offices around the world right now. Is it safe enough yet to send the next ship through? Tomorrow, we'll find out if the answer is finally starting to change. If you want to be here when it does, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is far from finished, and what happens next in that strait could shape oil prices, global trade, and international politics for a very long time to come.